Welcome back to another episode of Junk with Junior. So I jumped the gun a little bit. Wasn't being the best videoer on this situation. Brought the truck in here and started tearing it apart before I started recording anything for you guys. So we're coming home the other day and we get pretty close to the house. I was pulling an empty trailer and hear a heck of a noise come out of what I thought was the trailer that I was pulling, like a wheel bearing situation or something. And hit the electric trailer brakes, and I couldn't duplicate the noise. And we came up to the next stoplight and I hit the brakes, and then I start easing down on the brakes a little bit harder, and I hear the noise again, let off, noise goes away. Turns out it was the left front on the truck. Truck needed some brake pads apparently. Holy crap, let me show you this. Had no idea I was getting this low on my rotors and pads, but we ate into that dude pretty good. But even the good one that's not ate up, it's still worn down and below spec, so those are trash. Time to go in the scrap and starting over. But on the driver's side, I started pulling that off. I pulled the dust cap off of there, and I smelled the most horrific smell I've smelled in a long time. Burnt wheel bearing grease. Have no idea how this happens. So that's the second set of wheel bearings on the driver's side of the truck that I've smoked. Passenger side, still the bearings that were in the truck whenever I got it. I don't know how old they are, the history of them, but I've already placed the driver's side once a while back, probably 20,000 miles ago. Now all of a sudden they're gone again. It's the same grease that I put in both sides, so how did that side not last as long as this side? I have no idea. Packed a lot of bearings in my day and stuff, but I've never had that kind of issue. So time to put this thing back together. I'm waiting on parts, so I can't put it back together yet. Gonna be a few days, I guess, before we get everything here. So just kind of getting this one started because my life's been really busy lately. So I'm just going to get little pieces here and there as I can, put it all together for you guys so you can see what's going on. I do have on standby brake pads though. Those are already here. So we went with the Power Stop Extremes. So these are a carbon fiber ceramic formula. I really wanted these because they're low dust, but they're also for you know, some pretty heavy duty braking as well. So hopefully the weight of the truck, it'll help with all this situation. You know, comes with everything you need in there. Lubricant, got a proper bed-in procedure as well. So we're gonna go through that whenever the truck's all together, but they kind of look like normal brake pads, but I know they got some good stuff in them. So we'll get all that put together once we get some parts. Waiting on bearings. Reproduction rotors, not the best of selections there. Rotors are made somewhere, gosh, can't even say where the rotors are made. It pains me to say it, but they're not made here in the USA. But the Timken bearings, we got those on the way. Don't even know where those things are made. I love having made in USA stuff when I can, but when it came time to the bearings, I figured, well, let's go with some Timkens. We know that's top-notch quality kind of stuff, so that's what we're gonna do there. And start getting this thing back together as soon as we get some parts. It's killing me to have this thing in pieces like this. I don't like it sitting on jack stands. That's not where the truck belongs. And I decided to go with this Lyle Handy Packer. I've always packed my bearings by hand before. When I was a kid, my dad had the one that went on the 5-gallon bucket, but I don't need 5 gallons of grease. And you know, it just kind of limits your grease selection as well when you do that. So figured we'd go with this for the amount that I do. Should be plenty. And we're going to go with Lucas Red and Tacky number 2. Weird thing about this grease, it's not really advertised as a wheel bearing grease, but if you do enough reading on it, it is excellent for wheel bearings, as they say. But their catalog and their website says nothing about wheel bearings, so we're going for it. I know Lucas makes good stuff. They told me it's good grease as well, so you know, we're going to trust them and go for it. This process will be a little bit messy before it gets cleaner. The Handy Packer has this dust cap that goes on top, so when it's not in use, you're keeping all the trash out of it. Then this white piece has an O-ring seal and pulls out of here. So now we have to get all our grease in here. I don't know if we have to do the whole tube, but you know, if it fits, we might as well. And then what happens is this top piece unscrews. This piece will set, let's say it's full of grease just like that, and then you set the bearing on there, put this handle on it here, push down, grease comes right up through it. So let's get this thing filled up with some fresh grease. So I figured I'd just go with the old squeeze method, pinch that tube down flat, squished it all right in there. Now that that part is done, this will be the one that goes in here like I was saying. Pushes all the air out when it goes down. Set that bearing on there, then that grease is going to come right up around those holes. In fact, I'll give it a little push just to give you an idea, just like that. Except we'll have a bearing in there, so then the grease is going to come right up through the bearing. So we finally got some more parts in to get this truck back together. Got the rotors upgraded, drilled and slotted, and bearings. So I'm a Timken bearing man. These are actually made in USA. Only problem is I can only get the inners. The outers are on back order, so I had to go with Nationals. So I love the fact that these are made in USA, but these are made in Spain, so next best thing, I guess. You know, better than the China ones, so we'll go for it. National Bearings is a good name brand, so I think we'll be fine there. So let's get some bearings packed with some fresh new grease, and then we can install them, the inner one and a seal, and get this truck put back together. Alright, so we just untwist this top part, put our bearing on there with the tapered side down. Let's push this cone back on. Doesn't actually screw on when you put the bearing in there, but then we just give her a little push. There it is. We can remove that cone piece in the middle. Now that bearing's completely full of grease. Now that little bit of extra grease that comes around the outside there, we can actually take that and just wipe it on the outside of the bearing, so when we set it in the race, it's completely covered in fresh grease. Alright, seal's in there nice and snug. I'm just going to take a little bit of grease and wipe around that rubber face of the seal there, so we don't have to worry about it getting burned up right away till that grease gets a little temperature and it becomes fluid. So there we go, nice and lubricated seal there. Stick our outer wheel bearing in there, put this handy little cone back in, and give her a push. I've packed a lot of bearings in my day by hand, and I really love this Lyle tool. Great investment. Really glad I got that. It makes life much easier, and it's much less messy than I expected. So we got our outer bearings full of grease. Slide that dude in there. Pick up on the rotor a little bit. Let it go in there the rest of the way. Take that little extra grease. I'm not going to waste that. Give her a little smear on there, put it right where it belongs. Then, ready to put this nut and washer on. Washer's got a little tang in it so that it doesn't, you know, freewheel in there, keep it in place. Go in there just like that. And there's probably a million different ways and preferences that people have to do this stuff. I like to get this nut good and snug. You know, get those bearings tight up against the races. I like to tighten up this nut, and I'll give the rotor, you know, some good flicks by hand just to make sure that everything feels good. You run it down snug. I'm not cranking down on it. It's not like I have a giant wrench or socket on here. Just like to go snug. Give her some turns, get that grease moving, make sure everything just feels tight and right, and it does. And then I'll come back and just give her another little wiggle. You know, you can tighten down on it a little bit more, make sure everything's seated properly, just making sure it feels good. There's more than one way to skin this cat. I just like to make sure it feels good, and we'll back it off and it's ready for a cotter pin. So we got our cotter pin in there. Here's another thing that may be a little bit controversial. Everybody has their own way of doing things, the way they were taught, right from wrong. But this is one of those things that there's a lot of ways to do it, and as long as it's done, I don't think there's going to be an issue at all. So if you're doing it a different way, hey, that's cool. Some people like to bend both the tabs up from the cotter pin. The way my old man taught me was to have one up and one down like that, and the one that goes straight down, you actually don't bend it, you just want to cut it. Leave it right there. Watch out, because they do go flying across the shop, and make sure it's not on the floor where you'll get a flat tire down the road somewhere. And then trim the top off, and you are good to go, ready for a dust cap. It's out of pure habit. You always got to give her an extra flick, just to make sure it feels right. Man, it's slick and smooth. Did make a little bit of a mess though around the face here. Wipe that off, and it's dust cap time. Let's hammer that dude on there. Alright, passenger side's done, driver's side's done as far as putting the rotor on. Turns like a champ. Feels really good, nice and smooth, no noises, no feels, nothing. Just really nice. So, brake pad time. Got our caliper stuck up there on the control arm temporarily while I was waiting on all these parts to come in. Z26 carbon fiber ceramic low dust formula power stop extreme brake pads. So really nice. Splurge a little bit on these. Trying to get something that's better than what we had before. So we're going to get all these bushings, O-rings put on, keep all the dust out of the brake hardware and the bolts to slide back and forth. And of course they give you the special little grease to go on there on the back of the pad and on the slides, so you got minimal noise and squeakage going on. Calipers on, brake pads are in it. That all fit on there nice. Had to really compress that caliper all the way back in. I thought I had it far enough, but it wasn't quite far enough because we have a lot thicker new rotor now and new pads, so we've got a lot of travel left in those caliper pistons to come out now. So apply a little bit more of this grease that they provide us on the shoulder of the bolt here and on the tip out here. We're going to put those in, tighten it up, and we can move on to the other side because this side is ready for a wheel. The front brakes are done. Now we're under the back, and when I turn this wheel, you can hear there's no drag, so we definitely have some slack in those shoes. So we're going to go ahead and adjust that out so we just get a little bit of drag out of the shoes, so we know it's not got a big gap in there, and then the fronts are having to take up, you know, all the work in the back end of the truck, not doing any load. So going to get our tool in here and adjust these up. So the rear brakes are adjusted, time to go on a little test drive. A couple important steps here. 5 aggressive decelerations they want. So we want to get up to 40 mile an hour, bring it down to 10. We want to do that 5 times. Then we're going to do 5 moderate decelerations, 35 to 5 mile an hour, and then we're going to drive slowly to cool down the brakes. You never want to bring it to a complete stop. I don't think they want the pads to actually sit on the rotors like that. So we're going to go down some back roads around the house here because it's hard to do a test like that on the main road. You never know who's going to be behind you, and we got to do some, you know, fairly aggressive stops there. Cruise some back roads, nobody behind us, and we'll get these pads broke in or bedded in, whichever you'd like to call it, and see how everything feels. There's one. See if we can get 3 more here on this stretch of road. And we're going to do that a couple more times, and then we'll move on to the next test. Alright, so we got the 5 aggressive decelerations out of the way. Now we're going to move on to the 5 moderates. 35 to 5 mile an hour. We're going to repeat that 5 times. Let's see if we can hit us to 35 here. There it is. Just a nice, easy, normal brake. Bring her on down almost to a stop. Alright, 4 more of those to go. 5 moderate stops. Check that too. So now we can just cruise this old truck around for, what does it say, 5 minutes, and let everything cool down. We got like 2 stop signs. We're just going to do some nice easy stops there so we're not generating a ton of heat in these new brakes, and you know, let them go through some heat cycles and get that surface, the fresh surface off of them, you know, from being brand new. And so far they're feeling really good. I imagine after they go through few heat cycles they're only going to feel even better, but so far so good. I like it. We'll take it back to the garage. I want to jack it up the front end again, just double check our nut, you know, pull that cotter pin, make sure our bearings are looking okay and everything feels good. We don't have any excess slack. Just make sure everything's tight and right and ready to roll. Got a little bit wet on that test drive, but it's all right because we were taking it easy on the way back, so no big deal. Like I said, I wanted to jack it up and just check this, so I'm going to give the tire a little tug at the bottom. Just make sure it still feel nice. There we go, GM seal of approval right there. Well, I guess in theory we're good for maybe another 30,000 miles on these brakes. We'll see if they last any longer than the previous set did. But all in all, project went pretty smooth. Really satisfied with all the product. You know, the bearing situation, we had 2 different kinds, is what it is. We can't do nothing about the supply chain these days. Got some awesome Lucas grease in there, and that Loud bearing packer was really sweet. I love that tool. Made life much simpler and cleaner. So that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching Junk Whip Jr. We will see you next time.